Vice! You dumbass! Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry. Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace! How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord. Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
Hello, Beautiful Sun Zero here, Cyrus, and welcome to my review of Nier. Wow, just 10 seconds into the intro of this game, you can already tell this game is going to be pretty different from the norm. Anyway, Nier is a strange title to say the least. It's probably one of the more unique RPGs that I've played this gen. Well, in terms of story, and the gameplay is a bit different with how it introduced all kind of elements into it. But it's pretty standard, just from seeing the gameplay video with it. But anyway, you're probably wondering why I'm reviewing Nier when it came out so long ago. Well, I thought I would like to give my overall opinion on the game since it gained such a cult following over the years. That, and it's also one of the more memorable RPGs that I've played this gen. But let's not tarry and actually begin this review. Nier is an action RPG that was developed by Cavia and published by Square Enix. It is available on PS3 and Xbox 360. Note that I will be reviewing the Xbox 360 version of the game. Graphically, Nier looks a bit subpar. The art style that Nier got is pretty good, though it doesn't really transfer to the game overall visuals. There are some areas that looks pretty good, but still, the graphics that Nier got are pretty dated when this game was released. But I do have to add that overall magic in this game looks pretty good. The environments are decent, though there's really only a few of them, and the game gets you to repeat dungeons at the second half of the game. Overall, the visuals in Nier are a bit lacking when you get down to it. Story-wise, I have to say that Nier is fantastic in this department. The setting itself is a bit confusing at the start, since there's two settings. One is set in the apocalyptic modern world, but then there's a time skip of a millennium where the overall setting is more medieval. But there is one common factor in both of these settings. The overall world is in crisis and there's these strange creatures called shades that threatens mankind. It's a bit confusing at first, but it makes sense when we get to the later half of the game. Anyway, for the intro for both settings, you play as a nameless protagonist, which you name, who is simply trying to protect his daughter who seems to have a fatal disease called the Black Scrawl. Both the father and daughter of these different time periods also seem to have the exact same appearance too for some reason. But as I said before, they get explained later on in the game.
What have you done?
Anyway, for the intro synopsis, I'm basically going to try to explain the game in a medieval setting, since that's a setting the majority of the game takes place. Anyway, the intro basically starts out with the main protagonist, who I'm going to call Nier, doing random jobs here and there in the village. I guess it's simply called village. I don't think the main area or main town that Nier lives in is ever referred to in the name, so yeah. Where the daughter, Yona, suddenly disappears in search of a particular flower that said to grant any wish. Well, told by Nier himself, you know, where parents trying to get their kids to behave by telling them a story, you know, that sort of stuff. Anyway, it seems that she wants the flower so she can wish that her disease go away, so she doesn't have to worry her father anymore. Anyway, as Nier tried to look for her, he tracks her down to the abandoned ruin, where he finds her trapped in some sort of force field with a strange book in the middle of the force field. He tries to get to her by smashing away at the barrier, where suddenly shades appear, and he struggles to fight them off. The strange book then suddenly comes to life, and he proclaims himself as Grimoire Weiss. It seems that Grimoire Weiss is willing to lend assistance to Nier. Well, after some witty banter. Well, after requesting for help, it seems that Weiss can't really remember any of his powers. Well, isn't that something?
Shatter the very universe itself. Now, prepare It seems that the frantic bludgeoning you gave me earlier has caused my memory to escape me. What?
Anyway, after slaying some shades, it seemed that the blood of the shades is absorbed by Weiss, which allows him to recover some of his lost powers. After they defeat the shades and rescue Yona and return home to the village, Nier then wanders off to the village after tucking his daughter away and is frustrated that he is helpless to help his daughter. While wandering off, one of the villagers then recognizes Weiss from this old legend that's been passed on. Nier then goes to Pola, who's the village leader, sorry if I mispronounced that name, to ask about this legend. The legend basically goes something like this.
Book, Grimoire Noir, plunges the world into chaos. The White Book, Grimoire Weiss, will appear with his sealed verses. He will then vanquish Grimoire Noir and restore harmony to the world, or so the legend goes.
Anyway, after hearing the legend, Nier then figures out that since Grimoire Weiss is the White Book of the legend, he should have the ability to save Nier's daughter from the Black Scrawl, since legends say that Weiss has the ability to defeat Grimoire Noir, who is spreading the Black Scrawl. And so begins Nier's journey of trying to get Grimoire Weiss sealed verses in order to save his daughter. Overall, the story is fantastic. It's gripping, compelling, and will tug at your heartstrings when you're playing through the game. The game also has pretty strong plot twists in the story, which will keep you engaged throughout the story. And what makes the story so good is that the characters are great. From the witty Grimoire Weiss to foul-mouthed Kane, each of the characters are incredibly likable, got a good amount of depth to them, and got such great dynamics with each other that it's just a pleasant experience just playing through the game, just to see what will happen to these characters we will grow to love. The antagonist is also pretty good as well, though you probably won't know this unless you go to New Game Plus. People who play the game will know what I mean. Seriously, playing the game in New Game Plus is just a totally different experience in terms of a narrative point of view. And what also makes Nier pretty interesting to play through is that it's basically just a story of a father trying to save his daughter. But just seeing the lengths he goes to in order to save his daughter is just heartwarming. And kind of tragic at the same time, since, well, all this terrible stuff is happening to his daughter and Nier can't really do much about it at the moment, so you can feel a bit sad about him at the same time. And Nier also is pretty an interesting premise in sort of having this father-daughter relationship, because not many video games does this, in my experience. Well, not many RPGs. So in the end, Nier got a fantastic story and characters, possibly one of the best in an RPG that I've played this gen. It's possibly the only game that I got close to shedding a tear. And know this, I don't get tear when I get to play video games or even watching movies. So that's saying something. Next thing I go into is the voice acting, which I think is great. For the main cast, you got Jameson Price voicing the main character, Laura Bailey voicing Kane, Liam O'Brien doing Weiss's voice, and Emil being voiced by Julie Ann Taylor, and they do a great job with the voices, with each character really giving life to the characters. The side character's voice is also pretty good to decent. If there was a problem with the voice acting, it's that not everything is voice acted. Now, that by itself isn't particularly a bad thing, but there were some important scenes in the game which I thought was going to be voice acted, but they weren't. Even more jarring is when the same cutscene, or dialogue scene, well, part of it were voiced, and part of it was not. Not a major annoyance, but it's really noticeable when you're going through the game. The soundtrack is fantastic, with it comprising of orchestral score mixed with the chorus, which really makes each scene really epic, especially the boss battles. Seriously, if a scene is trying to be epic in this game, it's going to be epic.
That mewling child is inside. Without any rules to bind us,
Overall, the presentation of the game is fantastic. The visuals might not be on par with other games, but the story and characters are top notch, with the voice acting and soundtrack really amplifying the experience.
it seems our task is more difficult than I first envisioned.
Now, with me praising Nier's story and characters so much, You probably think I would consider this one of the best games that come out of this generation, right? Unfortunately, there are a couple of problems that Nier suffers from that really holds it back, which really originate in the gameplay portion of the game. Firstly, I explained the overall combat system that Nier has. The combat overall plays out like most action RPGs, where you have your standard attack, your heavy attack, roll, jump, and guard. You have 3 types of weapons you can use, which are the one-handed sword, claymore type weapons, and a lance. Each of the weapons you have their own unique style, so there is incentive to use each weapon type. Though the overall melee combat system is pretty basic as you can get in an action RPG. You also have the magic system, which is pretty good, as there's a good amount of different spells you can use in the game, and each of them looks awesome to use, and each have a use more or less. The boss battle in the game is also great and really makes the game feel epic when you're in one. The overall combat system is decent when you come down to it. There's not much depth to it when you get down to it, but still enjoyable to some degree with the magic system and the boss battles. The game also in some stages changes the camera angle to mix up the gameplay a bit, though it's only for a few stages in the game. The leveling system is pretty basic. You simply defeat enemies to get experience points, and when you get enough, you level up. The customization is pretty what you expect in an RPG, and you have a variety of weapons you can use in the game. Overall, the gameplay is decent, but there is a problem to it. It's kind of repetitive. Now, repetitive is not a term that I use very often, but it's really the only term I can describe Nier because of several factors. One is that you only have one type of weapon for the first half of the game, which is the one-handed sword. You get the lance and claymore when you get past the halfway point, but for the first half, you only get the one-handed sword. This is kind of limited as you really only have 2 types of attacks with your one-handed sword, which is the standard, and heavy attack, which is a hilt attack. You can also do a variety of magic when you go through the first half of the game, but the melee combat is still repetitive when you get down to it. The second factor is that once you get past the second half of the game, you have to repeat a majority of the dungeon again. Not only that, you also have to fight some of the same bosses in the first half. Third factor is that there's not much enemy variety, so in the end, there is really a feel of repetitiveness when you're going through the game. Is Nier combat overly bad? No, not really. It might be a tad simple, but it can still be fun even if it is a bit repetitive. The magic system is pretty good, and the boss battles are awesome, even if they are repeated. But when comparing to the story and characters, the gameplay can feel lacking at times. The side quests in the game are also pretty much fetch quests, though you can hear unique banter when you go through them, which can make them a bit worthwhile to do.
How dare you make me hunt down goats?
Those are sheep.
What is the difference?
Well, you know, the fur is different, and they move differently, eat different things.
People are different as well, yet you're all just called humans.
Yeah.
Likewise, Nier is probably one of the shortest RPGs I've played this gen, with me completing a playthrough of the game at about 15 to 20 hours. But the length can sort of be seen as a good thing, as that feeling of repetitiveness isn't as prevalent. There is also replay value in New Game Plus, especially with how much it adds to the story. I would say more, but that might be spoiling a bit. Difficulty wise, there's a range of difficulty you can choose. Overall, I say Nier gameplay is okay to decent. It doesn't really have much depth to it, and can feel repetitive at times, but it can be pretty fun when you get down to it, especially with the magic system and boss battles. Overall, I say Nier is a flawed gem. Nier has a compelling story and a great cast of characters that I got really connected with. The gameplay can be a bit of fun as well with the magic system and boss battles, but there are a good amount of flaws to it, such as the visuals being a bit dated, the overlying gameplay feeling repetitive when you're playing through the game. But at the same time, I would totally recommend the game. It's a pretty unique experience just playing through the game, and the game can be found for pretty cheap nowadays. and overall it's just a fantastic experience just playing through the game. Well, for me personally. Anyway, I personally give this game a 7.5 out of 10. It has fantastic story and characters, though there are a few issues with it.